Okay, and we're back. Thank you all so much for joining me here today. I'm here with the one and only Ashley Mcgirt. Um, and yeah, I just appreciate you all for stopping by. She is a world-renowned international speaker, not just internet takes, but a real TED talker. Look her up, a true clinician, and last but not least, what we're here to talk about, the author. Yours truly, Therapy with Ash slash Ashley Adair, Ashley McGirt, MSWLICSW. Yes, welcome, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Hey, the honor is mine. The honor is mine. But yeah, I just want to put you all on. So coming up this March 31st, 2026, we have your new favorite author and your new favorite book, The Cost of Healing in Silence, Navigating Racial Trauma and the Call for Culturally Responsive Care by the one and only Ashley McGirt. So talk to us a bit about what in this book is different than kind of what we're hearing online.
Yeah, so typically you don't hear conversations about racialized trauma, and my book speaks specifically to the impact that racism has on our mental health, as well as the call for culturally responsive care. And I went to some of the best schools in the field, and they don't necessarily teach you how to treat people of color, specifically Black people, because we're trained to apply westernized theoretical models, Sigmund Freud, Piaget, Watson. And so, what my book does that is different, it really looks at things from a cultural lens. And I actually tell the story through the lens of my grandmother's life that was cut way too short. And when I look at the lifespan of my grandmother, who died in her 60s, she was really stressed out. And I often wonder if there were sound, culturally responsive mental health therapists available for her, would she still be here? But what
Mhm.
she was met with was liquor stores on every corner in her neighborhood. There was just devastated with crime, all of these different things, and people who just came to take and take and take. And there wasn't community systems that actually uplifted her. And so I think about her and other people like her that don't actually receive good mental health services and how that impacts our life.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going off script a little bit here, but just hearing you say that, myself personally in my own story, my father passed when I was 21 years old, so pretty young, I guess, in the grand scheme of things. But he passed at that time. He was about 50 something years old, and my uncle passed just a few months prior. He had gotten a knee surgery, and I think due to some mistake on the part of the anesthesiologist, some sort of mishap took place, and he passed during physical therapy, where he was all outside of that, he had a clean bill of health. And it took a long time. It took me going to get my master's of public health to kind of like sit in that reality, because it's just so, death is so normal for us. I think we oftentimes don't inquire as to whether or not this person's life was cut short unless it comes at the hands of like a bullet or a knife or something like that. And so for me, because there was no immediate like boogeyman or immediate person to attribute this atrocity to, I think so many of us don't recognize that there was something preventable there. So I think, again, just to like echo your sentiments, these conversations are vital. And we just appreciate you so much for diving in and engaging with it, and hopefully people can take something from it that otherwise they may not have had before. But yeah, I guess I also want to touch on, from my experience as well, how was it being in those programs? I know you said you went to some of the best schools. Like, how did you, I want to say, survive that without becoming a corrupt person? Just to call a spade a spade. I think a lot of,
Right.
for myself, they just push you into the space, corporate, so on and so forth. How, like, what was it about you that allowed you to like retain that like ounce of your humanity and still keep that culturally contextual lens to now be in the position that you are now?
Well, I had the honor of also attending an HBCU, the illustrious Clark Atlanta University.
Okay, come on. Hey, I don't know
Yeah.
if you know, I am currently attending Clark Atlanta University. I kind of,
No, I did
yes,
not know.
yes, big CAU.
Hey, I love
Yes.
that. I love that. No, and I love that you also have a background in public health, because what I talk about in my book is how I grew up in a public health crisis that was not labeled as such. So when
Hmm.
I look at the crack epidemic of the 80s and 90s, where folks were criminalized, and now we have the opioid fentanyl crisis where they're getting resources, treatment. How much different would those who were impacted by the crack epidemic fare if they were received all of the same resources that we're seeing today with the
Hmm.
opioid crisis? But yeah, so you know what it's like at Clark. So I will say that set a really good foundation, just having professors, having people around me that really uplifted Black culture, Black community. But then when I went to a PWI, now
Hmm.
that is definitely where the struggle came, and where I had to often battle with my professors, the way that they want us to go about treating and diagnosing. And then I have to really explain, okay, but these are systemic issues. So then we're labeling individuals and pathologizing them for systems outside of their control. And then
Hmm.
oftentimes we mislabel it. So you take, for example, a child who just watched Trayvon Martin be murdered, Tamir Rice, Ahmaud Arbery, the list goes on. They are seeing these Black boys who look just like them. So then maybe they start to act out. They have certain behavioral issues at school. But you don't realize that they just saw somebody, whether it's somebody they don't know, like maybe Trayvon, or maybe it was their best friend that they just watched get murdered outside of their own neighborhood, and how that then impacts their behavior when they go into the school system. And we're not looking at the macro level conditions that impact their behaviors. We're just then labeling them, okay, you have this behavioral disorder, ADHD, we're going to put you on medication, and we're not looking at the root cause and how we can actually better support individuals within their families and in their communities. So I'll say that was one of the big pieces where I was constantly having to educate my professors, constantly having to advocate for people who looked like you and I. And that was a battle that I didn't face at Clark, yet when I was at University of Washington, or even when I was at Harvard, and I'm going back and forth with them. And that was a nonprofit management program that I was at there. So yeah, it's a constant battle. I'll say
Hmm.
I
Oh
didn't have
yeah.
to fight like I did at a PWI at a HBCU.
Absolutely. And that brings so much clarity as well. So you touched on a lot of great points right there that I think are essential that the people need to kind of get a bit more on. So bring the conversation back to the babies and the labeling slash misdiagnosis or overdiagnosis rather of behavioral issues that are truly at the expense of social determinants of health that are beyond their ability to really address in their day-to-day lives. I'm not sure how much of your work specifically addresses this sort of issue, but where do you see? Because currently, right now, I am in the position of a middle school teacher. Where do you feel educators and I think the community should step in to that sort of care where they may not have it in a clinical standpoint? And is there any training that you know of that's happening for that culturally responsive care for educators happening right now?
Yeah, this is exactly why I do the work that I do. So I actually grew up in a predominantly white neighborhood. I was raised by my grandmother, and when she passed, I ended up seeing a school counselor, a white woman, who didn't understand anything about the role of grandmothers in Black families and some of the issues that I was experiencing at that time. So I was 9 years old educating a grown white woman on race relations in America. So I think it's really important that we actually go into the schools, that we work with educators, that we work with counselors. This is why I wrote my book, to actually provide the tools and the skills for educators, for mental health providers, community members, to be able to actually advocate and work with our community members. And then when we talk about who's actually stepping in and helping them, I'll say we often forget, or I'll say we don't name these healers, but there's been people in our community who have always been stepping in. When I think about like barbers, the church aunties, coaches, elders, artists, all of these people, we just don't necessarily name it as healing care, but they've stepped in place of our community when they couldn't get to somebody like myself, or when there was somebody with, maybe a LMFT, a LISCSW, but they are labeling them and harming them in ways in which other communities members who have been able to step in and hold space for them haven't been able to. So I would say that those are some of the ways, just leaning in on who's already in your community, reading books like the one that I wrote, Post Traumatic Slave Syndrome by Dr. Joy DeGruy, Why Are the Black Kids Sitting Together by Dr. Beverly Tatum. There's a wealth of resources and training. I think about Dr. Patrice Douglas, who teaches DSM-5 for the culture and really
Mm.
breaks down some of these diagnoses and how we can better actually look at them when it comes to diagnosing people of color.
Absolutely, and I hope the people will write this down because I'm gonna go back and rewatch this to make sure I can add to my collection. Because I know for myself,
Oh,
I'm
I
so
got
happy that you pointed
it.
out. Okay, okay, yeah, but yeah, I'm so glad that you pointed these things out because I know for myself, we sit in countless professional developments as teachers, surrounding more adequate care for our students, more holistic care, but oftentimes it's very dated. Oftentimes it's presented to the staff in a way that is not engaging, that does not seem foundational. And I had this issue when I was in graduate school during my MPH. Like the conversations that we're having cannot be placed on a time clock of 50 minutes because we're trying to dive into so many nuances and so many things and anecdotal experiences that and then in a professional development, I think, or it takes a very skilled person in that space to navigate it in a way that is both affirming and respectful of time, because you find people being ushered off of very, pivotal moments in their lives for like, I appreciate that, but let's get someone else. You know what I'm saying? And I think just that little flip of the switch just tells everybody what type of conversation it is that we're having and how transformational we really want it to be. But yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more with coaches and the people that step in the community, the church aunties. And I guess what I'm envisioning is like some sort of like beyond just this book, because everyone in this position that is touching the hands of our youth, just touching anyone really, to be better equipped to give people what they need in their times of need. um but I'm envisioning like professional development for people in these positions that's really getting at something, that really is approaching it with a culturally contextual lens and is both for and by us.
Absolutely. That professional development is key. And that's part of the work that I do. I host workshops on understanding racial trauma, on working with students of color, especially. I feel like I'm not a big fan of the Teach for America, these people where they come into the hood and they try to say, okay, I served this community and then go off and leave.
If
And
my
it's
bad. Oh, you're back now.
like, oh no, it broke technology.
It's okay. Came it just went out at Teach for America. Funny enough, I'm in Teach for America, but I agree wholeheartedly. Go ahead.
Oh, well, I'm sorry, but
No, no, no. Don't be sorry. Don't be sorry. It's real. Go ahead.
yeah, I mean, as long as people like you who are definitely going in and really serving community, but there's other folks who go in just so that they can say they serve this specific population, and then they never go back and continue to help that community. It's like it's just a mark on the resume. I'm gonna say, oh, I was in Inglewood, I was in Long Beach or St. Louis or whatever, and I did this for 6 months, 9 months out of the year, and now guess what? I'm no longer in that community.
Oh Lord, I could have a whole conversation about Teach for America. But yes, I completely and wholeheartedly agree. And yeah, I think this goes back to I was witnessing people when I was being approached by the program and was getting more in contact with who was in it. I saw so many people that just did not resemble the community in any capacity. I do feel like I myself am more of a diamond in the rough. I'm from these communities, like the way these kids talk, everything that they're doing, we did. I'm not from the west side of Atlanta, but I might as well have been, in terms of the type of experiences that they're having. And I think it goes to show, and I think my students could attest to this, they feel very seen by me in they don't feel like it's transactional in any capacity. They know my teacher hat doesn't go off when that bell rings, and now I don't really care. I'm just doing this to go to law school, which I know a lot of people, I met a lot of people throughout that process who they're trying to become lawyers and doctors and all these things. And again, like you said, this is just a resume booster, a Peace Corps, AmeriCorps sort of thing. Not recognizing that they're really having impacts on real lives. And I think that is a good segue into something you said in your tech talk, which is why I mentioned it in the intro. That again, it just stood out to me so much. Like I really wanted to sit there for a second and just allow myself to feel the gravity of it. You said that as you in your experience as a hospice clinician, witnessing people die. you said that black people aren't dying well, which I've just never heard it phrased that way. I think black people have such a philosophical, sort of fantastical, I think, relationship with death, because it is so ever present in our lives. It is so, um you only live once. I'm here for a good time, not a long time. All the powers that be are behind me. Let me just go ahead and do what I do. I never thought about what does it mean to die. And this is someone for myself who has experienced a lot of people die young, relatively, at 50 and 60. The concept of, like, what does it mean to die well? I was just hoping you could give a bit more on that.
And that's exactly what I was speaking to, is the age gap, the disproportionate rates in which Black folks are dying in comparison to our white counterparts. So when I was a hospice therapist, I served two very different neighborhoods. I would serve Skyway, which is South Seattle area, predominantly Black and brown, poor neighborhood. And then I would hop on a ferry and go over to Vashon Island, which is just past West Seattle, but you have to take a ferry boat to get there. Most of the people who live there are predominantly white and very, very wealthy. And
Hmm.
so, what I would see from my patients in Vashon Island, they would be well into their hundreds. My patients in Skyway, South Seattle, they would be 50s. 60s. Matter of fact, my very last hospice patient was a 23-year-old Black woman who passed from a result of chronic stress related illness. And so when I look at the ways in which Black folks are dying, stress, chronic stress related back to systemic racism, that particular patient, the 23-year-old Black woman, almost all of her siblings had been murdered, either by community members, police officers, just plagued with different chronic conditions within her family. And so
Hmm.
it's very tragic. And that was very different than what I would see from my families in Vashon Island, who had all of the support, all of the resources, funeral arrangements made. Life insurance plans versus my Black and brown families in Skyway, they wouldn't have anything set up, and we would kind of have to scatter and plan, especially for like funeral arrangements, just advanced directives, all of these things that weren't put in place for these families, but the other ones on Vashon Island were already set up. And
Hmm.
so I was like, okay, why is it that these families are dying well and these families are not? And the common denominator, of course, is racism, systemic oppression, all of the things. But with education, with resources, with knowledge, we can really change the trajectory of our own lives so that we can, in fact, die well. Because we all have to die eventually. I just hope that it's not in our 20s, our 30s, or 40s, or 50s, like what we are seeing within our community and in my own family, your family, like you just shared. And, it's tragic that we have to bury family members at these ages. Versus, I had a white woman who was 104 years old. I had to discharge her because you can only be on hospice if you are showing active signs of dying. And she actually stopped showing those signs. So we had to discharge her from hospice at 104. So why can't
Wow.
our families? I don't know if we really want to be here till 104, but
Yeah.
we don't even have that opportunity to get there because of the things that are impacting our lifespan.
Yeah. And I'm curious because, okay, so I'm sure you're familiar with James Baldwin and his
Books behind me.
come on now, of course. And this position of, to be black and conscious in this nation is to always have some amount of anger. And I think putting that back to stress, I think a lot of times, self help and self care at this point has been bastardized by the Western nations to be capitalized in a certain capacity. But for me, as someone that sits in these movement spaces and these conversations, I'm curious as to what that sort of wellness and like de-stress looks like in a way that still allows us to be engaged in the fight, if that makes sense. Because I think a lot of times people sit in a space of like, oh, to be less stressed means to not be engaged. At least that's where I sit sometimes for myself. And I'm just trying to dispel that in my own mind. Like, what does it look like for me not to overload myself with so many different responsibilities and to be able to get adequate rest and to ensure that I'm eating properly when it's expensive to be poor. It's expensive to have to make ends meet and to try to have goals and ambition. Um, I talk to people all the time and they're like, oh, you're 20. You only need like 4 hours of sleep. You
Mm,
know, you only need to, you can rip and run. You can take a 15 credit hours, work a job, do the things, go out. And just knowing that that's going to land me in a certain position. But Yeah, I'm just curious as to like what does that look like in a day to day?
Yeah. And for each body, it's different. I really love rest. And for me, rest looks different. I always say I'm going to go take a nap. And for a long time, my husband used to be confused by that because he'll see me like just watching Netflix, scrolling on my phone. He's like, I thought you said you were going to go take a nap. I'm like, this is what I mean. This is by my nap. I'm just like not answering any questions. I'm not
Mhm.
talking on the phone. I'm resting in the way that feels good to my body. And I'm a researcher. And so, through my work in researching the impact of racism, I came across a New York Times article that showed the bodies of enslaved folks that had been exhumed. And the first thing I noticed when looking at those images was that the muscle had literally detached itself from the bone. And I often wonder if that's where the saying, work yourself to the bone, came from.
Mm.
And now
Mhm.
these are enslaved folks. And now here we are, so-called free folks right now, but we get the mandated breaks, all of those things, but we're still working ourselves to the bone. And so for me, it really looks like a rest that is true to your body, true to
Mhm.
your mind, joy. I'm really, really big on joy and laughter. Like this world is burning and falling apart, but there's also so much good to it.
Yeah.
And what are the things that light you up? Who are the people that bring you joy and make you smile and laugh? Surround yourself with them, have conversations with them, be in community with them. And so that's really big for me, especially laughter. I'm always going to comedy shows. So many of my friends are either lawyers or comedians.
Yeah.
And that is how I get my joy is through laughter.
Mhm.
And I would say those are some of the things, just really like pay attention to your body because your body will tell you, do you need to go to a walk? Do you need to ground yourself, step outside barefoot in the soil and really root yourself in the earth and come back to that? Do you need to actually take a nap where you're actually asleep or just scrolling on your phone? What does that look like? But if it makes you feel tense, the things that you're seeing on your social media, you're stressed out, you feel like you got to do more and you can't rest because you're seeing what so and so just posted on the TikTok, then that's probably not a good form for you.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I love that you presented this with examples and options that are very, I feel like tangible. And because oftentimes I think they feel so conceptual, theoretical, like, oh, I've done like the box breathing, which, deep breathing is, of course, good. But something that is like active and something that allows your body to be involved with it at the same time. And I love that you brought up laughter. I know with teaching, a coworker of mine called me earlier today just to laugh about something that happened, and it's such a rejuvenating profession. I feel like if you have the right spirit for it, because yes, each and every day, we're trying to improve scores to get them on the track to, reach a certain level of educational attainment, but really caring about them holistically and enjoying being in community with them, I feel like is also so important. So yeah, okay, that makes a ton of sense, and that for me gives me something going forward that I'm like, no, this is self-care for me. This is some
Yes.
like because I don't view sometimes going out as being essential, like, and being intentional about it to say, like, one day a week I want to go out. Because something I didn't find until I came to Atlanta was that I like to dance. I'm from a small town in Virginia. We don't really have places to go out and dance. That's not something that people really did, at least when I was growing up. So now being in the community where I can say, oh, okay, now I'm gonna make sure I get my rest in, put on my good shoes because I'm going out tonight, and
And Atlanta has no shortage of places to dance.
they do not. They
Now
do
I'm
not.
in San Diego and it's scarce. I split my time between San Diego and Seattle. And when
Mhm.
it comes to like good places where you gonna see us,
Mhm.
that's scarce out here. So we
Mhm.
gotta
That's
go to Atlanta.
yes. That's what I was told about San Diego, and I was not familiar. I did not know that it was like that out there.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I'm from Seattle, which people know to be predominantly white,
Mhm.
but there's more of a Black community within Seattle, just the way that we gather and we
Mhm.
commune, versus everyone in San Diego. It's a larger population, but everyone is very scattered. So you gotta
Absolutely.
go 2 hours to LA to really like be within the Black community. And
Mhm.
that's a big commute, which I'm
Oh,
going to
yes, it is.
tomorrow so that I could be in community
Ooh.
with my people.
Okay, okay. And I mean, I'm glad you brought up that aspect as well because and this is again kind of going into some free range thought. But I'm theorizing now that we have such ability to travel and like through connectivity via like 2 hour commutes, and that I think is pretty normal at this current space and time for a lot of people to just be like, oh, this weekend or one weekend a month I'm going this place, that place. But I feel like in some capacity we are losing what it meant to be in one location. It's like for an extensive period of time. Like, I don't know, through that connectivity I feel like there's also a loss of the regulars. Like, I see you every day, and I see you every Wednesday. I'm not sure what that looks like in terms of healing and wellness, but it's been really nice for me to go places and to be recognized. Like, oh, hey, this is what you want, X, Y, and Z. Because I know while I was in grad school, because I went to UNC Chapel Hill. Chapel Hill also very sparse. So I was always in Durham, in Raleigh, in Richmond, which is about 2 hours away, searching for that sense of community. But it also pulled me away from the black community that was probably feeling the same thing in Chapel Hill. Um, so yeah, I'm not sure what the
You're
question is in
speaking
that.
to my situation right now because I'm from Seattle. Seattle is home, but I've been going back and forth between there and San Diego, and I haven't really had a chance to build real community in San Diego because I do the back and forth. But I'm
Hmm.
also a person where I feel like I'm not meant to be in one space, and
Hmm.
I just love to travel. I'm a globetrotter. I've been to over 60 countries, and I'm just
Okay.
constantly on the go, and that's the life that I've set up for myself, as well as my husband, because he travels just as much with me as well. But again, when you think about that community and being in one spot, kind of like Cheers or The Living Single, you could just go into a building, hey, everybody knows you. And so I have that in certain communities, but in San Diego, where when I'm here, I'm either like at home, I'm tired because I've been on the go, I'm not actually out as much. But that's something that I've been thinking about and trying to be more intentional about building a home here in San Diego and not running off so much to LA, which is antithetical to what I'm saying since I'm leaving to LA tomorrow and then Seattle next week. But just how do you build those spaces when you do have to commute, hop on a plane, a train, or drive for over an hour, and what that really looks like and what it does to your energy.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's change in that. We're adapting as we're being more connected. We're finding what the new iteration of that living single is, because that was very contextual to a period of time, to a certain demographic that had a society set up to have those sort of interactions. Whereas now we're more on the go, and we're finding new ways to find that same sense of community. But you bringing that up, I just watched, and I know somebody's gonna try to take my black card, but I just watched Love Jones for the first time last week,
Well, you say you're in
and
your 20s, so I'll give you a pass.
I suppose, but I anyway, I'm in the space age wise where I feel like I'm more aligned with like the late '90s in terms of culturally, in terms of the way I grew up, because I still grew up outside and doing everything, but same time movies like that will slip through the cracks every now
Yeah,
and then. But in that movie, going back to what you said about being a regular, they had their spots where I know a lot of times for people my age as well, a big point of tension is dating. Whereas I feel like at that period of time, you knew where you were going, you knew where the people were going to be, and these were people that were relatively local, and you were going to have that aspect kind of as a given. Whereas now it's very common to, especially for someone my age, to go out and meet somebody that is in Atlanta and they're from San Diego. Um, it's like, well, this was a great time, but and I'm curious as to how do you feel about the effectiveness of online community as opposed to in person community, and does it have that same sort of, or can it have that same sort of like supportive impact that the communities of old once did?
I think it definitely can, and we've been seeing this as more and more people commune online, especially during the pandemic when we all were forced to shelter in place. I know Atlanta didn't close down like the rest of the world,
Yeah.
but for those of us outside of Atlanta, we really had to like rely on those community spaces. And I remember I was doing like watch parties with my cousins and stuff on Netflix.
Hmm.
The way they set that up, one of my really good friends, I actually met in a Black travel group online.
Yeah.
So you can definitely build those bonds, but I'll say there's nothing like that in person, being able to hug on one another, love on one another. But definitely those community spaces are very real. And I can speak to that, having met one of my best friends in a Black travel group. Other people within my community. There's a Black therapist group that I'm a part of, and a lot of us really commune together because being in this field, we can kind of be in a silo,
Hmm.
especially if you're in a private practice. And oftentimes, being a Black therapist, you're a unicorn, and
Yeah.
other folks not in this space don't necessarily understand all of the things that come with holding space for community while also trying to hold space for yourself and what that looks like. And so within those online communities, we're able to support one another, share stories, connect. But I do always say it's really important to still connect outside in the real world. But again, those community spaces, they're saving lives. To
Hmm.
be honest, I had a client who was experiencing infertility, and she didn't have anybody in her community who she could talk to. So she actually found an online community for folks experiencing infertility issues, and it saved her life when she was actually experiencing like suicidal ideation and all of these different things coming with her inability to bear children. And in that group, like that gave her more of a sense of being that in addition to our therapy sessions, and really helped her come alive. So I always support like online communities, all of those things.
Absolutely. And that last point is another great, I think, point of clarity. I know for myself, I was in therapy for the first time, in a more, I guess, clinical standpoint over the past year through my graduate program. They offered um, kind of like free therapy through the university. So I was in group therapy for the first time, and group therapy was something that I never really even considered. I didn't even really know what it was. It wasn't when I formed my concept of therapy, it's like, oh, you sit, you talk with someone, and that's beneficial. They give you new ways to kind of navigate your life and give good advice. But I found for myself in group therapy with these people that I didn't know, that for all intents and purposes, I have nothing in common with, save for the reason that we're here. Um, it was so healing. Like, I look forward to it so much every week for those same reasons, because we developed like a small sort of like kindredness and a sort of bond in this space each week to be able to come and kind of like bear our burdens in a way that was outside of the faith. So it wasn't like there was any sort of progression lauded over our heads where we should be or how we should be conceptualizing these things. um and I just think that's something that so many young people could really benefit from. I know I see it all the time in my school with these kids. So every week we do something called Wellness Wednesdays, where essentially we're supposed to sit in a circle, talk about things, present them with whatever. Conceptually, it sounds amazing,
Yeah.
but with the babies, this is the hotbed of insecurity. You give these kids an inch, they will take a mile. So they know that they're not talking about anything that's really pivotal to their lives with people that they know don't have their best interest at heart. But I think going back to something virtual, and I'll have to look more into what resources are available, because a lot of things are available. It's just getting to them.
Well, I can share some resources. I
Yes.
actually founded an organization called Therapy Fund Foundation. We provide free mental health services to Black community members, and we have a plethora of groups. So we have groups dedicated toward preserving Black families, and we have different themes that we offer. Sometimes they're hybrid, sometimes they're virtual, and sometimes they're in person,
Hmm.
because we really want to meet folks where they're at. And so those have been some of our biggest hits, because oftentimes people are still there's still a stigma around individual therapy. So folks will come to our groups all the time. They won't necessarily sign up for individual therapy, but you'll see them at our weekly groups, whether it's on grief or whether it's processing through childhood wounds, childhood trauma, the mother wound. What does that look like? But yeah, we have a ton. We have girls groups. One of our therapists, London, she offers a pearls of wisdom
Mm.
for the young girls that she offers quite a bit. We also have groups for sexual assault survivors. There's varying different topics, but yeah, and a lot of them are hosted by peer support, so individuals who've actually lived through these things, because I know oftentimes people are more willing to talk to someone who's lived through something. And again, there's still that fear and stigma around licensed mental health providers like myself, so they'd rather see a peer. But we
Hmm.
do also have therapists like myself. Like, I host groups. I have a Heal and Chill Black women's group that I host monthly, and other things like that. But yeah, it's all through our organization. It's free. If you're in Atlanta, New York, or anywhere across the world, you can tap into our virtual groups. We also have Takia, who's going to be hosting Black People Die by Suicide too, to really like process through suicidal ideation and
Hmm.
depression and things like that, that she hosts along with Jasmine Smith. So yeah, all free, no cost.
You got to give me these links, please. I will drop them in the description. I'll push these out like hotcakes, because the people need it, truly. And I think the beauty of working in the school system, especially as a full time educator, is that they tell us everything. Dear God, they tell us everything. Um, and I'm glad I went through the MPH program that I did, and just have had the experiences that I've had, because I know I can't save everyone. I know I can't bring everyone home, but to be able to offer these services to these children at such a young age, I feel like could truly like rewire their brain. Because so many of these things I didn't even hear about until I didn't even know we really had a school counselor until I was like in college. Like all throughout middle and high school, I couldn't tell you who our counselor was. I just thought they talked to us about where we wanted to go to college and our grades and stuff. I didn't know we could talk to them about like emotional things. That space really wasn't like curated for us. And I know so many other kids, so many public schools especially, have a similar experience as just kind of being washed through, this academic institution, not worry about nothing else. Um, so yeah, I thank you so much. And again, we're gonna get these to the right people because they need it. They need it.
Absolutely.
Um, but yeah, and then I guess now, I mean, Kylie already been into some free form talk, but I would just kind of like to open the floor. And you said you're from Washington or Seattle originally, right?
Sonics.
Okay, okay, come on,
Bring
come
bring
on.
back our Sonics.
No, they do. I think the league is having an expansion soon, and I hope the
They've been
teams
talking
come
about it.
back.
They've been talking about it.
I hope they do, because that's good for the culture. It's good for Seattle, sure. I'm sure. But yeah, how do you feel like that contextualizes kind of like how you approach things? Like, what experiences do you feel like you had that are specific to Seattle? It's funny enough because one of my good friends now is from Seattle, or from
Love it.
Spokane, or no, Spanaway,
Oh, okay. Spokane's way out the way.
Spanaway, no, Spanaway.
Spanaway. Okay, Spanaway's down south, like
Um, so
yeah.
yeah, but yeah, what experiences do you feel like you had there that kind of shape how you approach things now?
Yeah, I will say growing up in the Pacific Northwest has really given me like a well-rounded approach to life. Especially leaving Seattle and then going to Atlanta. That was one of the first times that I had actually really moved, and
Hmm.
just seeing the different dynamics, especially from predominantly white institutions to predominantly Black education. So I will say just some of the things differed in the way that people talk to one another, how people treat one another, colorism.
Hmm.
So I just got back from Aruba, so I definitely got darker. But on the West Coast, people consider me really, really dark. And then when I moved to Atlanta, I remember they were considering me lighter skin, which I thought was odd. They even did like the whole brown paper bag test.
They did that.
Yeah, it was like a funny thing that they were
Oh
trying
my
to do.
god.
Wow, wow, wow. But just the way that people perceived me. So I always was shocked when I moved to Atlanta and people would say that I was lighter skinned. And I'm like, no, I've been dark skinned my entire life. But
Hmm.
that's the way that people viewed my skin tone on the West Coast. Versus when you go to the South, they would put me more in like the lighter brown. But again, like I said, I got way dark,
Yeah.
which I'm happy about from being
Okay. Yes.
but recently. But yeah, so just the ways that people interact, how we see one another, how we talk, of course. And then I travel, as I've mentioned, I've been to over 60 countries. And I would say that also has really given me a well-rounded approach. There's communities that I had never heard of until I left. Like I remember going to Roatan outside of Honduras and meeting the Garifuna people and learning how they migrated from Africa and built this town, Punta Gorda, as free people. And we're all
What?
told that we migrated through slavery. But
Mm-hmm.
it's like, no, there's actually groups of people who actually chose to leave Africa, build their own communities, and they did that as free people, not through enslavement.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was really beautiful to just see how they preserved their culture, how they built this town and this community that is still there and thriving, and people actually want to be there. Or like a couple months back, we went to Colombia, and I remember it was like right when Trump was getting elected and removing all the diversity, equity, and inclusion. And as soon as we got off the plane in Colombia, we saw a sign that said, Black is beautiful. And
Mm-hmm.
just the way in which they praise Blackness. And so you don't see that
Wow.
unless you leave the community. And it was so enriching, especially to leave a community where all of the things that were happening with the new Trump administration, and then go to Colombia and be welcomed and embraced, and people just loving our skin and really praising us for our Blackness. And there's this town, Palenque, that we went to that also is where folks migrated from Africa, and they built this community in Palenque, and just learning their rituals and their customs. And so all of that gives me a well-grounded approach, and going back to being born in the Pacific Northwest as well. So I say all of it really makes up who I am. And of course, my grandma, I was raised by her and just really gave me the footprint. She's from North Carolina. So
Okay.
while she moved to Washington later in life and then raised us, she raised us with customs from North Carolina. So the
Mm-hmm.
way that we cook, the way that we speak, it's very different than those who are actually like true um Pacific Northwesterners, but who didn't have the Southern or the East Coast migration like my family did, that
Yeah.
my grandmother brought to Washington. So we have a lot of that within the way that we show up and communicate. And people will be surprised, like, you're from the West Coast. You sound like you're from X. That's because my grandma raised me, and she's from North Carolina. So
Yeah.
she's from Fayetteville, North Carolina.
Okay. Shout out DeVille. Okay.
So hear that in some of the ways in which I talk or the way that I cook my food. Some West Coasters will just be surprised, like, where did this come from?
Yeah. Absolutely. And I'm sure there's some people that will be the exception to what I'm about to say, but I know for my sample size for the people I know from Seattle is two. But for the people that I do know from the Pacific Northwest, I do see a bit more travel in the demographics, even being from the Midwest, from my friends that I know, as opposed to those of us from the South and Southeast. We don't tend to leave very much. And yes, there is a cultural preservation in that. And we do
Mhm.
have certain customs and so on and so forth that we're able to carry in a very, one to one way because this is all we know. But at the same time, travel seems to be such a big thing for like not just your health and wellness, but also for your like interactions with the world and everything. And I just think,
Oh, it broke up a bit. Oh no, it's froze.
okay, they come back.
Okay, you're back.
I guess it had to go one for one. I guess I had to go
Yeah.
out once too. But I'll ask them, have you been out the country? And I'm in Atlanta, and they'll say, "Yeah, I've been to Savannah before." No,
Mm,
I said, "Have you been out of the country?" They were like, "You mean like Florida?" And this
yeah.
is the real thing that kids are saying.
I hear it. I get it all the time. Actually, my other book that I wrote is actually behind me. I tried to travel it away, mental health tips for travelers.
Hmm.
That's my first book that I wrote. But yeah, I've learned that oftentimes more so on the West Coast, PNW, I'm seeing that we're traveling. One, it's cold. It rains all the time, so we want to get out where it's hot.
Yeah.
Also, we want to, be exposed to other communities. And I am seeing with the rise of like travel noir and other Black travel communities that people are getting out, getting those passport stamps, and really just exploring the world. And there's also been a big mass exodus of folks right now with the current administration who have left. I interviewed Dr. Jacqueline, who shares the story of her niece, Janelle, who actually died as a result of racism and just not being treated well. I have a whole chapter in my book that I dedicate to her. And unfortunately, due to all of the things that happened to her niece and even herself, she actually moved and went to Portugal. So I'm seeing
Hmm.
lots of people who are leaving the US because of the conditions in which Black Americans are being treated, especially when it comes to our healthcare. And so people leave outside of the country. I'm in San Diego and I'm on a hill, so I can literally, I'm looking out my window right now, I can see Mexico. So, every
What?
morning you'll see folks crossing that border to go get their dental care, get health things, all of these different things because it's cheaper than the high cost of America. Oftentimes it's way better. So that's something that I see very often, whether people are crossing the border, going over to Tijuana, or just flying out of the country for whatever the cost. Something as simple as a root canal that may cost a couple $1,000s here in the US, you can get that done in Mexico for $200-300.
That's insane. That's insane. And I know it sounds even crazy to me because I'm on the south. Well, people would argue that Virginia ain't the Southeast, but I'm not gonna get into that bag today. The
Yeah,
point
no,
is, um, yeah, it sounds so foreign to me. I mean, no pun intended, because this is like on the Southeast, it really is, although it's connected to the greater US, of course, and to the Northeast, I feel like most immediately, that just isn't something we ever see, especially me being from a small town, church on every corner. It's far for me to go 2 hours down the road to, this city there. That's I did undergrad at Virginia Commonwealth University in Richmond, but that was the big city for me. For where
mm,
I'm from, that was a big trip. Um, and I think so many people in the Southeast, be it maybe less so for Atlanta because this is a more like progressive southern city. But people in the Fayettevilles, in the Gastonia, North Carolinas, usually have the experiences of um or never are granted that even conversation. So I don't know. I bring it like when I talk to my students about like going to another country, I'm curious, do you feel like it is in any way integral for Black people to grow their perspectives beyond, their immediate communities? Or like, what would you say it's been for you to, or it's meant for you to like travel beyond to go see these communities in Honduras um, and Colombia?
yeah. Well, one, it's a privilege. And I understand that not every one of us will be able to do that, especially the high cost. I spend a lot of money
Hmm.
traveling, but also it's the way in which I spend my money. So I don't buy a lot of things, a lot of
Yeah.
material things. I tend to invest in trips.
Yeah.
You'll see I wear a lot of the same clothes because I'd rather spend my money on flights or hotels or whatever the case
Absolutely.
than buying a bunch of labels and new outfits all of the time. Um,
Hmm.
but I do honor that that is a privilege, and I acknowledge that not everybody has that ability. And if it's just going from Atlanta to Savannah, if that's all you can do, then do that. But
Yeah.
just leave outside of your community because there's folks in Seattle who will refuse to go to Tacoma, which is 45 minutes down the way, down south, and people will just stick within Seattle and not leave the city at all. They won't go to, you mentioned, I thought you said Spokane earlier. I'm like, well, that's a couple hours out the way.
Yeah.
People will never make that trip to Spokane or Bellevue. So, yes, while I do encourage folks to be able to go to Mexico or Aruba or all of the places that I've gone, I also know the difficulty and the cost and obtaining a passport. My father was incarcerated. He just was able to get a passport after all of the things that he had to do after being incarcerated. And he's super excited because he's never left out the country.
Yeah.
We got married in St. Thomas, and we specifically had to choose St. Thomas because it's a U.S. territory, so that my dad
Hmm.
could still come. But now he's like, I finally got my passport. I'm about to leave. So I
Yeah.
also understand there's folks like my dad who, through incarceration, are not able to get a passport, and there's certain things that they have to do until they can get to that point. But yeah, if you can do it, definitely do it. And if you can't, just you could still leave outside of your city limits,
Hmm.
whether it's taking a bus, taking a train, saving up the funds for that. I also know a lot of community like libraries, they'll offer free park passes, bus passes to be able to get you to experience some of the communities, whether it's like hiking or exploring a museum. People don't often realize all of the things that the library will get you or what a library card will get you. Or if you have low income, at least in like Washington and California, I know you can get these park passes, bus passes from the library as long as you have a library card within that community.
Yeah. Absolutely. And again, I really do appreciate you kind of like scaling and not placing like a emphasis specifically on like international travel. I mean, of course, if people have the means at their disposal to be able to do so, then great. Because I know a lot of times people can feel not only priced out, but that can make them even more, I think, beyond hesitant, even envious of those that are traveling and can put them in a position where they're not even willing to do the small things and go 45 minutes down the road or an hour, and things like that. And I think for me, that gives me something tangible with the kids to just say, hey, make sure if you don't can't go there, go to Dahlonega. It's 2 hours up the road. Go see some mountains. Go do a little hike. But yeah, that's really good. And I could keep going. I could keep asking questions, but I really want to pull this back to the book specifically, um and kind of land the plane on um maybe potentially a last message you may have for people as to how this book kind of came to fruition, like maybe what drove you to create this. And yeah, I hope outside of that, they can see through the conversation how this is not the typical self-help book, and it's something that can actually be transformative and can be something that they can give to other people in the community to hopefully have a similar impact on them as well.
Yeah. I shared earlier a little bit about my grandmother, and she's really the inspiration behind this book because her life was cut so short. And then I talked briefly about her life and death, but what I didn't share is that she experienced a stroke as a
Hmm.
result from stress, and she had a brain bleed, and then she was sent home. The same thing actually happened to Jamie Foxx. He has a stand up on Netflix called What Had Happened Was,
Yeah.
where details a very similar story that what my grandmother went through, but unlike her, he's a celebrity multimillionaire, but still was sent home. His family had to advocate for him.
Hmm.
He survived. Unfortunately, my grandmother did not survive that interaction. And when I think about these things that are still happening to us, whether we have celebrity, whether we have the wealth, I look at Serena Williams, who almost died giving birth, as well
Hmm.
as Beyonce, all of these people, and we're still experiencing poor outcomes as a community because of bias, all of these things within the healthcare system, and people who aren't given the skills or the tools to actually show up for Black folks. And that's why I wrote the book, because I wanted to be able to provide the toolkit so that people who are in healthcare, people who are mental health advocates, people who have experienced these things directly can actually heal out loud. And those who are treating them have the knowledge and the wherewithal of how to protect them so that they don't have situations like what my grandmother experienced, even like what Jamie Foxx experienced. While he survived, that's still a very traumatic thing that he had to go through. And why is it that our communities are still exposed to this?
Absolutely. Oh, that's so good. So again, everyone, hope you all enjoyed this conversation with Mrs. Ashley Mcgirt. Again, the book, The Cost of Healing in Silence, Navigating Racial Trauma and the Call for Culturally Responsive Care, releases March 31st this year, 2026. Please hop in line for the pre-sale. Tap in with her online at Therapy with Ash. Get involved in the network of all the things she's posting, all the amazing services that she just listed in the conversation. I'll make sure to drop those links below. But yeah, thank you all so much for engaging the conversation. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
And have a good rest of